Well, happy Monday. We will go ahead and get this show on the road. Thanks for joining us. Probably get you on and off a little bit quicker than normal this week, just kind of coming off a holiday weekend. There's not as much news that rolled out, but there was a really big economic report on Friday, and there's actually a potential market mover on Wednesday. And Aaron put this week's economic calendar in the chat for you guys to see. So I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to share my screen because I want to walk you guys
Guys,
through last week's monthly jobs report. And okay, Aaron, can you see the MBS highway on my screen?
not yet. Got it.
Cool. Okay. So each month on the first Friday of the month, the monthly jobs report is released by the Department of Labor. And um, last week it was released on Thursday because Friday was technically the day that Fourth of July was observed. And the market closed at 2 o'clock. And so the impact of the jobs report was a little bit muted this month. There's two numbers within the jobs report, two different surveys. One survey shows how many jobs were created as a whole. And then the other survey is what impacts the unemployment rate. And again, going back, many years, most people look at the headline number, which is how many jobs were created. And so if we look at the headline number, 57,000 jobs right here were created in the month of June. That's about half of what was expected. So the headline number wasn't great. Um, and kind of on the same token, previous months were revised lower. So the May jobs report, which was 129,000 jobs, was revised lower by 43,000. The April that was initially a headline of 148 was revised lower by 31,000.
Mute
If
is on video.
if you take those 2 months, the 74,000 jobs that were lost in the two prior months were actually more than were actually created in the month of June. So we had kind of a 3 month rolling average of kind of a negative net job loss. If you guys have been with us for the past couple of years, you know that for the last many years, 3, 4 years, the initial headline number has been overstated in most cases. And then in the future, next 2 or 3 months, and this is a trend that's been the case for a number of years, the numbers are revised lower and lower and lower. And so if we look back and you say April was pretty good, 148, May was pretty good, 129, as those are revised lower, especially May down to around 78,000 jobs, it's not as strong of a number. And then June was weak at 57,000. What do you guys think June's numbers will be revised to in August and September? Probably lower, right? And so overall, you kind of have some weakness in the overall kind of job growth sector. Number of reasons behind that, like AI certainly is a piece of that. Um, at the same time, the unemployment rate went down. It went from 4.3 to 4.2%. And you would say, well, how the heck did the unemployment rate go down when we had kind of a weaker jobs report and we had some prior months that were revised lower? And that's because there's a second survey, the household survey, which is used to determine the unemployment rate. And there were 507,000 job losses according to that measure. But the labor force participation, or the number of people in the labor force, went down by 720,000. And so this household survey that's used to determine the unemployment rate, you're not counted as unemployed if you're not attempting to work. So like if I was retired and no longer, trying to work, the fact that I'm not employed doesn't count in that survey. But at the same time, if I was trying to work, I lost my job 6 months ago and I've given up, or I used to work part-time and now I'm not working at all anymore, I'm not going to count. And so the participation of those in the labor force is having an impact as well. So that's why the unemployment rate went from 4.3 to 4.2%, even when the job report overall was pretty weak. By the way, sorry for the dog's background noise. I'm on vacation this week at the beach, and every time my daughter and her friends go out the sliding door to to the back. You can imagine what the dogs are doing. So sorry for the background noise if you guys are hearing that. Um, okay, so that's one important thing is like we're continuing to see trend in economic weakness, not a lot of great job growth, and that's been the case really since post-COVID, like 2022 and on, the kind of the post-COVID recovery. It hasn't been a great economic recovery from a job standpoint. We talked last week, and we've talked for a long time about kind of the K-shaped recovery. Big difference between those that are kind of older, more established, stronger economically, and those that are like younger, less established. It's kind of like two economies we're living in right now. Um, okay, I want to show you guys today's report as well because we've got some good information here that I wanted to share. And a lot of the last few months, what have we been talking about that impacts interest rates? We've talked about Iran, the Strait of Hormuz, is it open or is it not, and oil prices. And I pulled this chart up here because you can see that, oil got over $100 a barrel, really starting in April, kind of about a month into the war. It ebbed and flowed, but we hit it again in May. Oil prices today are down to $68 a barrel, which is about where they were before the Iran war started. And so then you might ask, well, why are interest rates still about a 0.5% higher than they were before the war started in March? And the reason for that is that oil prices are a lagging indicator. Well, oil prices is a leading indicator.
Leading.
The impact of inflation is a lagging indicator. And so when oil prices started going up in March and April, interest rates went up, but at a slower pace. They were lagging oil prices by 30 or 60 days. Um, Over the past few months, you've seen oil go from $104 a barrel May 18th, down to $68 today, 6, 7 weeks later. Why have mortgage rates not gone down to that same degree? Oil is the leading indicator. Inflation and mortgage rates are a lagging indicator. And so today's report that we get, kind of the daily update, just kind of spells this out. But oil's flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. It seems like the ceasefire for the most part is holding. And if oil continues to stay lower, that's a real positive sign. It's going to take 2 or 3 months for interest rates to get back to the levels they were pre-Iran war, but we've been inching along and slowly trending that way for the past 30 days. More good news on oil. If it continues to stay down, some of those inflation numbers that spiked in like April, May, and June will start to trend back lower, which would be a positive sign. Um, the last thing we've got this week is we have a Fed meeting. We have the Fed meeting minutes. So last week was Fed Chair Warsh's first Fed meeting. Um, so has anybody ever been on like the board of directors at like Little League or like a nonprofit or your church or something like that? So if you've ever like volunteered, like Aaron and I met, we met through, and Dave, you probably do the same thing. We met through the board of Winter Park Babe Ruth. Like his daughters and my sons were playing baseball and softball, and we were both on the board. Every time that board met, it was a nonprofit. We had someone who was the secretary, and the secretary had to take minutes. And the minutes were how we accounted for what was discussed at prior meetings. And the Federal Reserve operates in the same manner. Every time there's a Fed meeting, there's Fed minutes. And last week, the Fed came out with their policy, which was no hikes, no cuts, no change. Fed Chair Warsh gives a statement, he gives some testimony, he answers some questions in front of Congress, but you don't know what the other members of the Federal Reserve Board thought. That's what the Fed meeting minutes are. And so this Wednesday, we get the release of the Fed meeting minutes from Fed Chair Warsh's first meeting last week. And oftentimes the Fed meeting minutes aren't a major market mover because the news has already happened. Was there a hike? Was there a cut? What does the Federal Reserve Chair say? But in this case, with a brand new Fed chair for the first time in a number of years, who's trying to implement some different policies, what the other members of the Federal Reserve Board say and what their opinions are matter more now until we get a feel for what this Fed is likely to do. And I think what you're likely to see on Wednesday is a lot of differing opinions. There might be some members of the Federal Reserve Board that thought we should have cut rates. There might be some that think we should hike rates. It feels like the trend, and I've shared this with you guys last week, and we will, go into the end of the month when the Fed meets again at the end of July. It seems like the trend is that the Fed is more likely to hike next rather than cut. And we've shared on this call a number of times that a Fed rate hike is not necessarily a bad thing for interest rates. A Fed rate hike could send a signal to the market that the Fed is willing to fight inflation. And if the Fed's willing to fight inflation, that'll bring mortgage rates down and that'll bring inflation down. So a Fed rate hike is not something that we should be upset by. If they hike for the right reasons, it could actually help mortgage rates. But it'll be really interesting to see, and I would encourage everybody to take a little bit of time, not Wednesday during the day, but when it gets released, just find some articles online. There will be some bullet points of like what different Fed members shared, but it'll be something that we all should be in tune with what's happening, um, because what the Fed said last week that gets released this Wednesday will likely impact what they do in July and beyond. Um, if you had to like ask me, what do I think is going to happen next? I still think the next move is more likely a hike rather than a cut. And that's messaging that we need to get in front of and share with our customers because people want lower mortgage rates. They might see a Fed rate hike and think that it's going to cause higher mortgage rates, which isn't necessarily the case. Um, Last thing I've got, and I'll share this with you guys, then we'll wrap it up for the day. Um,
It's almost done.
I'm guessing that everyone who is on the call has had a customer, whether that's a first-time home buyer, a move-up buyer, an investor, vacation home, but someone that was going to buy a house or maybe sell and buy that has delayed the purchase of a property over the last couple of years because they're waiting for lower interest rates. We'll air quote that. We've had people waiting for lower interest rates since 2022. And if you look at the national averages, what have interest rates done for the past 4 years? So in 2022, kind of national average rate was around 5.6%. Every year since then, 23, 4, 5, and 6, national average rates have averaged throughout the year above 6.5%. And it's for the most part been between 6.5 and 6.7. So if people are waiting for lower interest rates, we shouldn't tell them, oh, you're wrong, rates aren't going up or down. We should put it back to them with the question. So like if I talk to a buyer that's like, hey, Mike, I'm not in the market right now. I'm waiting for rates to go down. I shouldn't give him like a long rambling opinion of why I think rates are not going down quickly, and in a meaningful manner that will like change their affordability or their payment significantly. I think we should answer their opinion with a question like, well, hey, Aaron, why do you think rates are going down in the future? And I would venture to think that most people have no answer. Um, and so, hope is not a strategy. I think we've all kind of heard that, line before. And so, one thing we've started to do when people say, "Hey, I'm waiting because I want to wait for rates to go lower," just say, "Cool, well, okay, I understand that. What do you think is going to cause rates to go lower?" And every reason they would give could probably be met with a counterpoint. So we haven't seen interest rates below 6% meaningfully for any specific significant period of time since 2022, like summer of 2022 was kind of when they spiked into the sixes. And I don't think you're going to see meaningful moves lower to get to a level that people would be super excited about. Yet people are still delaying getting in the market, not just 1 year, but multiple years. And so I think we really have to kind of peel the onion back. Like if someone's waiting, what are they waiting for? And what information do they have that would actually cause them to change their mind? And like what would cause rates to move lower? And there's really nothing that's going to cause rates to move significantly lower that would get people off the fence if the fence is because interest rates are above 6%, let's say. Um, but if you guys hear that, and I think that's a conversation for a few of us to have, like, if Sherry and I are working together with a buyer, like her and I both can talk to the client about that. And Aaron just popped a comment in the chat here, and I think you're 100% right. Like, 5.5 to 6.5% is probably the range you're going to see for quite some period of time. And if rates get below six, that's a great interest rate. And if they're in the mid sixes, that's probably average. But the next 5, 10 years could be a different range that we're accustomed to. The range of rates from 3 to 5 from like 2006 through 2021 is probably gone. We've been in a new range for the last 4 years. But that seems to be for us, what's keeping people on the sidelines is they feel like rates are high and they're waiting for something to change. We just don't see anything that's going to cause rates to move down in a meaningful manner. Um, but be on the lookout for that. And when you hear it, simply just kind of turn it back to the customer and say, what makes you believe that rates are going down um, to a significant level in the short term? And there's probably not much information that they have other than this. It's a hope. Okay. That's all we got for today, guys. Appreciate you jumping on. Have a great day. Go Team USA tonight if you're watching. And we will see you guys next Monday. Thanks, everybody.